Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett along with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and this week we bring back Dr. Gordon.
We do indeed, and we're going to be doing a show called So You Have a Migraine. I originally titled that show, So You Have a Migraine Headache. I have stricken the word headache for reasons that will become clear when Dr. Gordon joins us and talks about the migraine condition, which is much larger than simply a migraine headache. And we think that there are an awful lot of folks out in our audience that either have experienced it or know people that have experienced it. And we believe that they will enjoy this discussion with Dr. Gordon quite a bit.
Should be an informative show. We'll get back to it right here on The Verdict after this.
I like the idea of improvisation and starting with not a preconceived idea. All of my work is about visual images taken from my memory. I'm Brenda Kingery. I am an artist and I'm a proud Chickasaw. One time I said, "Oh God, please don't let me die with my paintings in the closet." And what I would want them to be is everywhere. I would want them to be loved, to be used, to be respected. You work your whole life doing this. You just keep going as long as you can. And I have such a good background with a 106-year-old grandmother that I've always thought in my mind I would just paint until I'm 106. My Chickasaw heritage has become a primary part of my life. And the reason is, it's a place I call home.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
People have been talking about energy independence for a long time. It's always been popular, but today it's possible.
We have an enormous supply of oil and gas in the United States, much more than we thought just a few years ago.
New technology, massive new discoveries, largely made by Oklahoma companies. It literally changes everything.
And Oklahoma is leading the charge. Go watch this video to see why. Energy independence starts with us.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we are really pleased to welcome back to the set of The Verdict for his third appearance on our show, Dr. David Gordon. Dr. Gordon is the chair of the Neurology Department at the University of Oklahoma College of Medicine. He did his undergraduate medical work at the University of Miami and had some residencies and fellowships and the like thereafter. He's board certified in neurology. He specializes in stroke, cardiovascular disease, migraine headaches, and headaches generally. We're going to talk to him today about the term migraine, what it means, how broad is it, how all-encompassing is it, and we sure are glad to have Dr. Gordon join us again. Thank you for giving us your time again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Gordon, explain your background and your work in migraine prevention, because I think I don't know that a lot of our viewers are going to know that that's a specific area of expertise.
Absolutely. So my training after my neurology residency was actually in stroke. But what happened was patients come to me with these various spells of visual symptoms or tingling or vertigo, and people think it's TIAs, stroke-like things. And I would come to me and they keep having the same spells with not getting better with blood thinners. And you come to realize that migraine can mimic stroke. And so this is what happened to me in the early 90s when I first started my career. I would see a lot of these patients and I would say, okay, well, it's obvious it's a migraine. Go back to the migraine doctor. And the migraine doctor would say, well, it could be a stroke, and they'd be scared. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll take care of these patients. So literally, even though I'm a stroke doctor, and on the inpatient side, I break open blood clots with TPA, blood clot breaker, et cetera. On the outpatient side, I see all these spell patients with headaches or other symptoms that are actually migraines, and migraines are much broader than headache. And I take ownership of those patients. And it's been really 25 years or so that I've been doing this, taking care of migraine patients.
Well, is there a way for a person to like self-diagnose? In other words, if their head hurts, it might be migraine created, it might not be. Is there a way for a person to know, or does it have to be a doctor that diagnoses it?
Well, generally speaking, it's good to go to a doctor to make the final diagnosis. However, the general principle is migraine is genetic. So you've had it all your life. And you may not know you've had it all your life. You may think you have other things like regular headache or tension headache or sinus headache, and they're really migraines. And migraine can give you other symptoms, abdominal pain symptoms, nausea, lower abdominal pain, GI stuff, spinning sensations, that's called vertigo, et cetera, tingling, lots of symptoms. So my point is this, that the key to migraine is it's intermittent and it doesn't lead to bad consequences. So if you're having headaches intermittently, the odds are overwhelmingly that it's migraine. Now, if you have your one sudden bad headache, well, that's a worrisome thing, and maybe other things can do it. Bleedings in the brain, tumors, other bad things. So you need to see a doctor right away or go to emergency department. But if it's intermittent and going away and you've had it for years and years, it's just common sense would dictate that it's a benign phenomenon. Migraine is not benign in the sense that it can lead to a lot of disability and other problems, and it's very painful. But at the same time, it doesn't kill you. It doesn't decrease your life expectancy.
Now, the layman's definition of a migraine headache is one that I think we need to discuss a little bit and dispel any false ideas. I envision someone with a migraine headache where light bothers them a great deal. They can't be in bright light. They have to lay down. They may be nauseated. They may feel just terrible for quite some period of time. Is that a fair definition of a migraine headache? And are there other kinds of headaches that give you those symptoms that are not migraine?
Right. Well, so those symptoms are consistent with a migraine, but migraine is much more than that.
Yep.
So the key point is that migraine is not a headache. The symptoms you described are some of the symptoms of a migraine attack. The way it works is you have a genetic predisposition without even realizing it. Maybe you or mama, your daddy, somebody had it. They may not know they had it because they've rationalized these symptoms for something as due to something else, but you have the genetic tendency to get attacks. And then your brain, in migraine, is hypersensitive. There's a part of the brain that wants to fire when it shouldn't fire. And migraine brains don't like change. So any major change in your environment, believe it or not, barometric pressure changes, weather fronts, altitude changes, changes in your stress level, changes in, for women, estrogen levels, changes not eating, not sleeping, various things like this are called triggers. What happens is you have the genetic tendency, and then a trigger comes along and brings out this possible tendency where, and in general, what's really going on is it's like a slow motion seizure in the brain. It's a slow chemical activity, a march of chemicals that goes across the brain that leads to a bunch of symptoms. And headache is a common one, and people think of that, lay people think that bad headache equals migraine. Not true. You can be having a bad headache due to something else, and you can be having no headache and still be having a migraine.
There's so much research being done on genetics these days. Is this something that a breakdown of a person's genetics can determine and illustrate that they are likely to have migraines?
That's a great question. The answer is now no. We have identified 3 migraine genes thus far. All of them are related to this phenomenon we call hemiplegic migraine. This is where you have weakness on one side of your body from a migraine, mimicking a stroke. Okay? In fact, it is not uncommon for these patients that come to the emergency department be told they've had strokes. But if you've had recurrent strokes that are always the same and the MRI scan of the brain is always normal, it wasn't a stroke. But somehow people don't understand that this can be due to migraine. But we have 3 genes identified for hemiplegic migraine. We've not identified the actual genes for the other people, but other types of migraine. And there are many types of migraines. My personal feeling is that one day, when we identify these various genes and have genetic markers, it will be much easier to diagnose and treat migraine. I think that's a big part of the future research.
Can someone with the genetic disposition to have this condition avoid it by not experiencing any triggers that bring on symptoms?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So the most common trigger for a migraine attack is stress letdown. So most people think it's with stress, but it's usually just after stress. When you think about it, it's right after the final exam, first day of vacation, Friday nights or Saturday mornings, you suddenly feel queasy, you have diarrhea, you have a headache. Any of those symptoms can be migraine.
That's what I feel when a jury comes in.
Well, exactly. After a big case, exactly. After a major speech, I mean, the stress letdown is the most common trigger. And so you can't avoid life. Right? So it depends. There are medicines you can take. I mean, it's a chemical problem. Migraine's a chemical problem, so it takes a chemical solution.
Well, you're talking about medicines. It makes me wonder, are pharmaceutical companies interested in this? Is there profit to be made in a diagnosis or some sort of remedy?
Yeah, there really is. And I think it's underappreciated. I think that unfortunately, most people, even scientists and researchers, believe certain epidemiologic data that suggest that headache only occurs in 18% of women and 6% of men. And if you really look at those studies, that is a gross underestimate, because they're only talking about a very specific kind, the bad headache on one side of the head, blah, 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 all the stuff you mentioned. Those surveys only tacked those kinds of headaches, the migraines. Migraine is much broader than that. So I think the opportunity for drug companies is so vast. If they really understood how broad migraine is, how this chemical change wave in the brain can lead to a whole host of symptoms that most people, they're going to their GI doctors, they're going to their cardiologists, they're going to their psychiatrists, they're going to ENT doctors, they're going to a lot of other doctors for symptoms that are actually migraine. And honestly, this has tremendous marketing value in the future if people really knew what migraine was.
And I'm not meaning by this question to ask you to endorse or trash any particular over-the-counter medicines, but on the over-the-counter medications that say they address migraine, are those medications addressing a headache, or are they addressing the broader migraine condition?
That's a great question. In general, they're mainly addressing headache, although honestly, I have found that ibuprofen, for example, can sometimes stop an abdominal migraine. Now, abdominal migraine, no one's heard of that in your audience maybe, is a condition in which you have intestinal symptoms from the migraine. Because what happens is when this wave occurs in the brain of changes in activity, it changes the nerves that go to the gut. So the gut actually does change in relationship to the brain. And strangely enough, taking ibuprofen, Excedrin migraine, maybe Tylenol, these medicines can help those symptoms as well. The danger of over-the-counter medicines, and they all work well for migraine. Excedrin migraine, by the way, is the same as Excedrin. They just got marketing for migraine, and they called it Excedrin migraine. Okay, there you go. So, but those medicines all work, but if you take them more than 2 days in a week, any pain medicine you take more than 2 days in a week can actually cause a syndrome called medication overuse syndrome that makes your headaches and other migraine symptoms constant. So this is what a lot of people don't recognize. They start taking a pain medicine for the headaches. You can even start the pain medicine for something else. You have knee surgery, you take a pain medicine. And if you have migraine especially, you're prone to this condition called medication overuse syndrome. And your intermittent migraine type attacks become constant. And then you say, why do I have a headache every day for 5 years, 10 years, 25? I've had patients for over 25 years headaches every day from taking Tylenol or ibuprofen or Lortab, and it doesn't matter which pain medicine it is. So even over-the-counter or prescription pain medicines can cause daily chronic headaches or other symptoms.
Dr. David Gordon is with OU Medicine. We'll be right back.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the Set of the Verdict. Dr. David Gordon is our guest here, and we're going to continue our discussion about migraines. What happens physically when a person gets a migraine attack?
So what happens is that a person who has the genetic tendency, a trigger comes along, change in stress, change in weather front, change in food or sleep habits. For women, estrogen changes. That's why women are said to have more attacks than men, because changes in estrogen levels trigger migraines. What happens is this change leads to a series of events in the brain. And there are 4 phases to a migraine attack: the prodrome, the aura, the pain phase, and then the postdrome. So in the prodrome, you drop your body's serotonin levels. Serotonin is a chemical that's used, it's very important in depression. It's low in depression too. So it's common for people with early parts of the migraine to have mood changes. So even before you get the headache, you get mood changes, you get more irritable than usual, snippy, you might get more depressed or even euphoric in some people. You tend to have food cravings. Food, you're not realizing it's a food craving, but you suddenly say, I want chocolate. I want nuts, I want bananas, I want sweets, I want fatty foods. Why? Because eating those foods raises your serotonin levels. And your body says craving serotonin. It says go get some serotonin. You may yawn more than usually and say, why am I yawning for? I'm not even tired. So those are the typical parts of the prodrome. And a lot of people mistakenly think that, for example, chocolate and nuts trigger migraines. They don't. They're a treatment for migraines. What happens is you desire the chocolate or nuts, you eat a little bit, and then you have a headache anyway. You say, I shouldn't have that chocolate and nuts. No, you should have had more. And Snickers and Reese's are like the best treatment for migraine, I'm telling you. So really good. So you have this.
And Godiva is not a sponsor of this show, but
no,
should
but
be.
It works. I'm telling you what. So I do that. When I come home with a little headachy at night, I'm always eating some peanut butter, some chocolate, nuts. It's very common. So that's the prodrome. Food cravings, mood changes, maybe some yawning. That then leads to starts the whole cascade, that chemical march I said. It typically goes from the back to the front of the brain. And different parts of the brain do different things. So the symptoms you have are dependent on where in the brain that march is. So the back part of the brain is the vision center. Right in front of that is a sensation area. So it's common to get visual symptoms. That's one of the first things. Spots, dots, zigzag lines, sparklers, in your vision as part of it. That's called an aura, A-U-R-A. It's the neurologic symptom that mimics TIA type things, mimics stroke-like things. It tends to march across the brain, so your symptoms go from one to the next. So after that, it's often tingling. And usually it's a traveling tingling. You'll say, first I notice it here, then I notice it here, then in my leg. And just over minutes to hours, kind of marches down the body, or you notice it in different places down one side of the body. You can have spinning sensation, vertigo. You can have, some people get trouble speaking, actually aphasia. It looks just like a stroke. Hemiplegia, I talked about, weakness on one side. And then it then at one point hits the part of the brain that controls your autonomic nervous system. That's the part of the nervous system that controls both your blood pressure and your gut. So blood pressure changes are common during a migraine. And that's another myth, high blood pressure causing my headaches. No, that doesn't happen. But during a migraine, your pressure goes up. And then commonly you get these GI symptoms because that autonomic nervous system is controlling that. So the same thing controls your gut, controls your blood pressure, and you suddenly get nausea, or you get diarrhea, or lower abdominal cramping pain, common in migraine, common. It's part of the so-called abdominal migraine component. This whole thing is called the aura phase. And then after that, this marching wave of chemical stuff, then you get the next thing, which is the pain. So the pain nerves that are in the meninges. Meninges is that sac that goes around your brain and spinal cord. And you've heard of meningitis. That's infection of the meninges. And it's lined with pain nerves. And so when these chemicals go in the brain, turns on the pain nerve and you get headache and you get bad pain. And the light bothers your eyes and noises bother you. The same thing can happen with meningitis. Light and noise bother you then too. Why? Because as long as you affect the meninges, you're going to get headache with noise and light intolerance. So it has nothing to do whether it's a migraine or not, but it's part of the prodrome, part of the whole package. The other interesting thing is that one of the pain nerves, the main pain nerve to the face, controls the arteries to the face. So the arteries in this face swell in the nose. Thus you get nasal congestion. So people think they're having sinus headaches when it's really a migraine with sinus congestion. There's no such thing as a sinus headache. Sinus headaches are migraines. There is no such thing. Yeah. They have done studies giving antibiotics to half the people with so-called sinusitis or sinus headaches, and those without don't get antibiotics. No difference. Antibiotics don't work. But they give a migraine stopper medicine to those patients. Their sinus congestion goes away. So this is part of that that pain phase. And then the last phase is the postdrome, the malaise, the fatigue. You feel like I'm run over by a truck and maybe tender and that kind of stuff. Hurts to touch the skin a little bit, that kind of stuff. So that's it. The prodrome, you have this mood changes, food cravings, irritability and food cravings, maybe some yawning. Then the aura phase, where you have the neurologic symptoms of the sparkly lights or the tingling or the trouble speaking and the spinning and the belly symptoms and the blood pressure changes. Then the pain phase with headache and some nasal congestion, maybe even bloody nose. Young people get bloody noses commonly because it's so engorged they get bloody noses, and they could get cauterized for no reason, when there's really just a migraine. And then the last phase is the postdrome. And now if you look at this, you'll see, and it all makes sense to someone who understands migraine. It's a clear pattern. But you see that each of the symptoms are different parts of the body and different kind of symptoms. So it confuses doctors and patients. And they all chase their tail doing tests on the intestines and tests on the ears and for the spinning and tests on the heart for, by the way, chest pain can also occur instead of just abdominal pain during that time. So it can mimic a heart attack. Now, go to this hospital, make sure it's not a heart attack. But if you have a chest pain episodes with normal tests, probably migraine. That's the point, that these are all normal tests in migraine, and they're recurrent, and they have it more than once. So it's very common, and people go to multiple doctors, and no one seems to understand what's going on. They get put on pain medicines, which makes it worse because they take them too often, and it's a big problem in the community.
Are there things that someone that has experienced what I will, as a layman, call a migraine headache or migraine condition before, are there things that that person can do to avoid that recurring?
Yeah, well, the most important thing is medicines. Okay, so there are two kinds of medicines. There's migraine preventers and migraine stoppers.
Okay.
Migraine preventers you take every single day. You have to let it build up in your system. After 2 to 4 weeks, it'll start protecting you against migraines. And you have less attacks, not just the headaches, but also the belly ones, the chest pain ones, the spinning ones can all be less if you take the right migraine prevention medicine.
And that's prescribed by your neurologist?
Prescribed by a physician. Any physician, but neurologists know the most about this usually. Yeah. And different people are different, respond to different medicines. The interesting thing about the preventers is none of them are designed for migraine. So they usually are certain, not all of them, certain blood pressure medicines, certain seizure medicines, certain depression medicines actually also work for migraine. So what we do is we pick the side effect profile we want for the patient. If you're 45 and you already have a little high blood pressure, we'll pick a medicine for blood pressure that also treats migraine, for example. If you're overweight, one of the medicines we use helps you lose weight. If you have trouble sleeping, there's some that help you go to sleep because they would sedate you at night. So you just pick a side effect profile you want for that patient. And the key to those medicines is to take them so that you have the number of headaches you have per week is at least less than 2, or at least migraine spells less than 2. Because if you take stoppers more than twice a week, you get that medication overuse syndrome.
Yeah.
And there are some specific stoppers, not just the ones we talked about, the over-the-counter ones, but there's some specific ones called triptans. Triptan, triptans. The generic name all ends in triptan. The most common is Imitrex. The generic name is sumatriptan, but there are some other ones that are triptans. And triptans are migraine-specific medicines. They go right to the serotonin receptor that's important for migraine and stop it. They don't help pain, they help migraine.
Do allergies and allergic reactions have anything to do with migraine?
Well, not specifically, except that many people mistakenly think they're having allergies when they're having migraines. That's a common phenomenon. The weather front comes through and the trees are pollen and they get congestion and a headache and they say, oh, it's an allergy. And well, okay, if you're having sneezing and coughing, it's probably a real allergy. If you're just having headache, pressure pain with congestion, it's a migraine. Totally different.
And last question, because we just got a few seconds left, is does age have anything to do with it? Are children or older people more likely to get migraine?
Everybody gets it. You've heard of colic in infants? That's abdominal migraine of infancy. Okay? So it's genetic, so you have it all your life. Now it tends to be worse with teenage years because of stress changes and estrogen changes in women when they start having their periods. It tends to be worse in your 20s and 30s, kind of go way after that. But it can come back later in life, especially for women when they have menopause and their estrogen changes. So it can fluctuate throughout one's life.
Dr. David Gordon making his 3rd appearance on The Verdict. Fascinating show.
Yeah, it wasn't long enough.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We'll have to be back on with a new topic.
Thank you very much.
All right, he's with OU Medicine. We'll be right back with a final word.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. But sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I really think people are so unaware of the number of kids waiting just in Oklahoma. And I think if more people knew that those children were out there waiting, I think that just by the way we live our lives and the people we talk to, that maybe we can help encourage adoption from Oklahoma.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
We are back on The Verdict, wrapping up a show with Dr. David Gordon, where we discussed migraines and all the different symptoms and causes.
Well, perhaps I'm the only one, but I certainly before this show did not understand that there was a difference between a migraine condition and a migraine headache. I just thought they were one and the same. But he certainly dispelled that misconception for us. And I didn't get to ask him the question that I'd really like to know the answer to, and that is, how do you determine which doctor to go to when you've got some of these symptoms? Do you just go to your regular routine of doctors, or is there a migraine person that you should seek out? I suppose he would tell us a neurologist would be more likely than anybody else. But he is doing a grand job and is on the cutting edge of the new research that's going on in here. He has 140 people that report to him on a daily basis out at the Med Center and is in charge of this unit, and they're really doing good things in this area.
I sense also as we get more research in genetics that there could someday be a breakthrough on this very subject, and a generation or two down the road might deal with this condition a lot different than we do today.
Yeah.
That's going to wrap it up for this show. We have a couple of websites though to leave you with. First of all is Dr. Gordon's website. That's at oumedicine.com. That's oumedicine.com. And then we have a website where we'd love to go, for you to go and tell us about a guest you'd like to see on a future edition of The Verdict, or a subject you'd like to see us discuss. And our website is theverdict.tv. That's theverdict.tv. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. Thanks so much for joining us here on The Verdict. We'll see you next week with another show. Yeah, I can't imagine anybody.
Okay,
It seems a little tedious even for me to sit there and read. But I had no idea there were so many leagues and teams came and went. I don't know why.